truth is a pathless land. It starts with you and me, too long buried in sand. The truth will set you free. Truth is love, freedom above. Find out what's below the surface. They want you to know. Bring back the sunken land. We reveal the hidden hand. Free your energy with ancient technology. The future is now, and we're going back. Remove the state of deception as we chart our own map. The future is now, and we're going back to back up the present with the knowledge we stack. It's not the way they say. It's time that you come out to play. They don't know the way, so we've gone astray. All our effort and time and wealth was taken away. But knowledge sets free, a frequency to be. Wake up and you'll see, it's not the way they say. The future is now, and we're going back. Remove the state of deception as we chart our own map. The future is now, and we're going back to back up the present with the knowledge we stack. It's not the way they say. It's time that you come out to play. With love in your soul and freedom on your mind. The truth in your heart, birth of a new mankind. The future is now, and we're going back. Remove the state of deception as we chart our own map. The future is now, and we're going back to back up the present with the knowledge we stack.
Here we are.
The
Welcome,
future is
everyone.
now. Pretty good. It's a nice feeling.
How are you, Andreas? How is
Pretty
everyone?
good. How are you? How's everybody? I saw some happy people in there. My neighbor Xirtus, someone said we had a. I made
Very good.
I made like a piece of art inspired by the art of Raph just now. I'll share just because I was thinking about this exact thought. Something about that creature just put me into my neighbor Bohogrove. You know, there has to be this sort of kind of, yeah, I think we all were thinking it.
Perfect.
But you know what? It'd be cool if the owl turned into like a magical character, kind of like he's adorable. He's adorable. He's adorable, right? You can imagine like the kids riding around in the giant owl sub like machine, basically. My neighbor Xirtus. Okay. No
Well,
worries.
what they have in that one, I think the character like the best actually. Don't they have this bus cat kind of
Yeah,
thing in
that was
Totoro?
what I was.
That's
Yeah,
the
Totoro
coolest
Treasure
actually.
Show,
Yeah.
the vehicle, which I feel like that movie more people need to see in Japan, because you know how in Japan you can basically live in the city on top of each other in a phone booth, a size apartment, or you can live in the ghost town that is the rest of Japan. Like all the rest of Japan is just old people are dying or dead, and young people don't want to live far from their jobs, you know? So they're just abandoning the rest of Japan. They've got like a few cities, and the rest of Japan is just like turning into wildlands. And the way it goes is either you get a house made in the 1860s, 1880s, or something like that, or you're screwed. Because if you got a house made in the last 100 years, they're only made for 20-year periods. Nothing's designed to last in the 20th century in Japan, which is crazy because a lot of the technology is super old in Japan. People don't update. They're all 80, in Japan. So they have fax machines still, and they have old televisions and VCRs and cassette. Like, they don't get new things if they don't have to get new things in Japan. It's counterintuitive.
All I can say is I stayed in Yamato City for a few days in 2007,
Okay.
and with a really nice family. And the dad was working for IBM as like a support agent. I don't know exactly what he did, but what's for sure is even at that point in 2007, they were still handing out these punch cards from, I guess, 30 years earlier as like notes to scribble on the backside,
Wow.
So they still had them on file or whatever. And Yamato City, first of all, of course, I'm not even sure if that's only a StarCraft meme, the Yamato cannon, but it's interesting because it's like the closest station, I think, was Chuorinkan, and then you could take the train directly to Shibuya to be in Tokyo. But it's literally a sprawl because Yamato City technically is its own city, but there is, don't think like there is wildlife in between Tokyo and Yamato City. It's all buildings, right?
Right. It's like mostly abandoned. Well, not completely, but it's like
I think
a lot less people live there.
I mean, I don't know how it is now. I think back then, at least, I think it was all populated, but all because it was so close to Tokyo, of course.
Right.
And many
True.
people working there, right? So there were people all around. But the one other example I had was with in Shikoku. So Shikoku is the small island, not the lowermost island, Kyushu, but the small island a bit more up. And the capital city is Tokushima. And as they're there with an old lady, literally pulling potatoes out of the ground, that's the only time I did that. But going around and like just looking around, and maybe I had related the story once before, and just looking up into the trees, and they literally were like pretty big spiders sitting in between the trees. And I was like, oh, now I understand why in Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time you have randomly these skull spiders coming up at you, because you like have something similar literally there. And supposedly the game was inspired by the guy who made it, just running around in Japan countryside and being inspired by that, and then creating Legend of Zelda series out of that idea. So
makes sense. I saw this guy, today, if you go to Japan, you go an hour outside of Tokyo, most places, you're going to find less and less living people. It's like if people who could have lived there retired, and so it was their parents were getting out of the city or something like that. But now to have you want to be close to your job. So you got people buying houses for $6,000. Here's a white dude moved to Japan, and he's going to buy a house for $6,000. And he bought this house like over a year ago. When was this made? Actually, over a year ago. And I saw he has an updated video where he like redid the interior completely, but like he got the house with everything in it because they just didn't want to ever go back. They didn't want to be bothered to leave their apartment in the city to deal with their parents' stuff. You know what I mean? So because the average age in Japan is what, over 70? What is it like average age Japan?
all I know is that there is this.
Okay, sorry.
There's sometimes online you can see, buy this cheap house here and there, and if anyone considers it, also check for the reasons why you shouldn't do that, or the reasons why you should be wary of it, because like you said, many of these houses aren't necessarily built to last, as strange as this is. Someone even here said in chat, in America it's the same, but they just don't tell you. I mean, I can definitely believe it.
That's true. Things are definitely crap now. It used to be that things would burn down. Now they just melt because they're made out of plastic,
But also that if you would get a house in Japan, it's quite possible that you would need to thoroughly renovate it, to say the least, or
Totally.
insulate it and all of that. So just consider these additional costs if you ever think of doing that. Because of course,
Totally.
in terms of idea, you can live in an anime movie because it literally, Japan really is like that. Just now we have actually a common friend of ours who's there right now, and he was like, I feel like I'm in a movie and so on. And I'm like, yeah, it is like, and he's not even into animation, but it's like, it is like a movie. But the one thing which is not, I mean, maybe still from the 80s, but still in the West, we don't have it, is the super advanced toilets, the super advanced hot beverage vending machines, and of course, the super advanced trains. For some reason, we can't get around to have that in Europe or America. I'm not sure why.
I mean, you can buy on AliExpress all that stuff. No one seems to do it. Like I had to send the sauna to Austria, but there's definitely like, fancy toilet seats that you can just install on your toilet that they make, and then just have to
Of
connect to
course,
your shower
but
line.
it's not a regular thing. In no
No,
hotel they would
not
have
even
it or
slightly. Not
whatever.
even slightly. It's crazy. Did you hear about Forest City really quickly? Have you seen that in Malaysia?
No,
So I
no.
was talking about this recently because I saw some kid had gone to Forest City, and basically in Malaysia, between Singapore and Malaysia, there was this giant $100 billion development, and it looks incredible, right? Like, look how pretty this place is with all of these towers and everything else. You don't want to go on the beaches because the beaches are polluted from all of the cartel and smuggling and whatever, even just regular gray market manufacturing of electronics that are being dumped and brought across the Singapore and Malaysian Strait here. So it's pretty polluted, and there's saltwater crocodiles that grow to was that 30 feet like 9 meters or something. 9 or 10 meter crocodiles can consume you off the coast like some horror movie. But other than that, it's like a really nice looking city. The only other problem with it is he's like literally the only person in the entire city right now. There's a few people that work from like Bangladesh that are security guards here, but this is a completely failed $100 billion investment, and they had multiple failures. I mean, the city looks great, but it's built on top of a fake island that was water, and they just put sand there and pounded it down. So you can't be sure how long that's going to last before there's like a crazy earthquake and these 100-story buildings just start falling into each other, right? But I mean, they started building this like 20 years ago. Then 2008, the economic crash happened. So the Chinese started investing more and more in real estate. And then there were, a bigger Chinese collapse. And then there was the 2019 COVID. So just basically everything wrong possible in the world's economies had to happen right after it being at its like peak for this to exist. But yeah, it's completely empty, which is incredible. Like we should film a zombie movie here. It just looks like perfect. So he has to like take a motorcycle in, and once he gets in, like once you get like within about 40-50 minutes from the city, there's just no one left for the rest of the it's so eerie.
Just because you're mentioning it's built, or it's basically an artificial island. I just looked this up, and even Bing confirms this for me, because I had heard this long time ago. Someone told me like, yeah, don't you know, Las Vegas is built on a sinkhole or on a swamp. And at least here it says, yeah, the area that Las Vegas occupied was once a lush, humid swamp full of rich vegetation. So I'm wondering how stable that is, but Las Vegas still stands, I guess.
I
don't
imagine
know,
that there's
so.
also a huge tunnel systems in Las Vegas as well. They probably are anchored down in some pretty interesting ways, But I mean, Las Vegas is it's now the JFK stuff is interesting because they're showing how the CIA and the FBI were fighting with each other, which we already knew, but it's a lot clearer now. And that the CIA was working with the mafia because of Cuba. They were like, well, a lot of these families that were in charge of Cuba were the mafia, right? So they would rather see Cuba back in the hands of the Americans, because Juan Batista would probably be helping, Ruben Juan Batista, right? The leader of Cuba during the time when the mafia controlled all the casinos. But then they helped because the FBI were trying to bust the mafia for its East Coast connections. They helped the mob reestablish itself in Las Vegas since they weren't able to give them Cuba like they had been promised. So, and then they took Las Vegas from the families in the late 1980s, basically, like, but into the late 1980s, early 90s, most of it was taken over by the government anyway. Right now, the government controls Las Vegas, which is, it's totally a mob town, just converted. But yeah, I think it was originally kind of, yeah, swamplands, right?
Yeah.
Paris on swamps too. Mexico City. Sorry, didn't mean to close that. Mexico
No, it's
City's
okay.
on swamps too. A lot of these cities are built on swamps, which is pretty interesting.
And anyhow, with all these, I mean, they love to call it tofu drag constructions in China, and you just showed another example, which is Malaysia, I guess. But I'm really wondering, okay, it can be an investment scam, all right, but especially considering whatever we may or may not know about history and about economy and about resets and so on, I'm still wondering, like, why pile up these buildings? Is it really only an investment scam? Did they do at least some of those cities succeed? Is this for like a population coming in 30 years, or will the buildings already have crumbled to dust by then again? So
This is a good question. One of the things that the guy noticed when he went to stay in Malaysia in his motorcycle trip, he tried to find a hotel, and the hotel said it was booked for a year straight, that he couldn't get into it. And it was booked by this group called the Network School, which has a clearly very expensive domain name, ns.com. They must have paid a fortune to own ns.com. Here's Vitalik, and did you just see Brian Johnson, our
oh, great.
our Mormon immortalist? There's some pretty interesting who's who in this Malaysian network school, and they call it a school on this website. But the more I look into it, and the more of what they're trying to do with Malaysia, it's the network society, and they're trying to build sort of a network new world order. I don't want to say it's a bad thing,
But I'm sorry, in Malaysia,
in
one and
freaking
a half
Malaysia.
K. Yeah, I mean, maybe for a New Yorkian or a San Franciscan
Totally.
living in whatever, it could be a good deal. But that 1.5 K to be in Malaysia with roommates, like, come on.
Well, what's the coin market cap? What's the value of Ethereum right now?
Of course, but
wouldn't you know, it's pretty close to about 1,500. It's, it's 18 actually. It's doing pretty well right now, but it's something like 1 Ethereum a month. And so this is a big Ethereum based society that they're trying to do, an ERC20 society. And they're doing it on an island that the Chinese built but kind of abandoned. That's not Singapore, but it's very close to Singapore. And it's not quite regular Malaysia, right? Because no one from regular Malaysia lives there. But 40% of it is invested by the Sultan of the region of Malaysia, because they have like a Muslim dictatorship, quasi dictatorship, right, that runs Malaysia. So it's a pretty interesting group of people that are trying to build this sort of new world crypto society.
yeah, but the thing is their plan
Networking.
just to stay insular there and work remotely for relatively expensive, because you could do the same thing in a different place probably for $500 a month, if that much.
Absolutely. But what do you get? Do you get to meet all of these young and like urine pants soaked workaholics?
Your business can be the next unicorn. Ha 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 ha.
Right. Or you can fall in love or something. That's the like, because I don't know, there's some like, these are hardworking, super stressed
Why was my
out,
first idea when you started
hypermanic,
explaining
neurotic.
this that I had the question in my mind, is it a cult?
It's definitely, it seems like creative utopian living together. UCULT for sure, something like that. But I don't know, I thought you'd like, at some point we should look into that more to see what the hell they're really up to. A startup society, Raf? That's crazy if they call it that.
Startup is a bit of an overused word. What I would like to see is if they actually manage to vitalize the city and actually have businesses open, and not only everyone staying in one hotel for relatively high price, So,
I mean, because if it's like New York and they got this weird like school club kind of thing, I mean, God only knows, but I imagine that you can wash a lot of money in a place like this. There's such low taxes for businesses. So you would just set up your business in the mall there. No one ever visits the storefront. You say you have an online activity, and you end up paying 0.1 or less percent of the cost because you're doing business on this offshore, literally offshore man-made island. I mean, it just seems like a perfect place if you're actually washing like millions and millions of dollars. This would be saving you, if you were washing $100 million, this is saving you $10 to $40 million, right? So it's probably worth it.
I'm just trying to calculate how likely is it that there is not some variant of this type of operation running there in the back end.
Oh, I mean, there's absolutely, that is what's happening. Like, I would say it's pretty clear when you look at it. There's a bunch of businesses there. So, like, he walks by malls. There are malls there. There's no one in the mall, but they have like $10,000 bottles of liquor and things like that in the window, so they can say it's it's the same reason why McDonald's would put a bunch of these storefront McDonald's and strip malls in like the worst parts of the country, so they could say that they lost money overall, even though they had money in like huge amounts made in these major city places like Manhattan and San Francisco, whatever. They lost money because they had to have all these other McDonald's that didn't succeed as much, right? That's kind of the plan.
Well, I'm curious to see how it's going to pan out. I actually have a bit of stuff about China as well. Yeah, but that's coming a bit later.
Okay.
So yes, what we can start with, well, of
TikTok's
course, yeah,
Chinese. That works.
everything gets Ghiblified now. It's always so funny to me how awkward politicians are, because you have a very tiny neoliberal party in Austria called the Neos, and even they're like one of the important, I want to say girls, women running the party, also recently posted, whatever image of her doing a presentation, and she Ghiblified it. And I'm like, I don't know, it's kind of, I'm not even sure, cringe is not even the right word. It's just like so uninspired. Like,
that's kind of
just
the thing.
run
Like,
on the trend, I'm waiting for their ice bucket challenge or whatever it is.
That's what it is. It's like ice bucket challenge level. And I wonder, because I think there's so many better art styles that we've already gone through. Like, we already saw like 18th century Japanese art style. I mean, that was like the first thing I wanted to do, is like here, some kind of okusai or something like that. But I mean, I would like to see more of the Muppet stuff. I think the Muppet stuff is fun. I think if we just focused on the Muppets, but that you could use just about anything other than Ghibli. The reason why I kind of am okay with them using Ghibli, or I understand it, is because Ghibli, the what's his name, Miyazaki, what's his name, Miyazaki, right?
Hayao Miyazaki, Hayao, I believe.
Miyazaki Hayao. He said he didn't want people to use AI, and it was so terrible. And I think that gets you in trouble. Like, if as soon as you go up against the beast, man, like, you're gonna lose. So him trying to stop people from using it in that art style, I feel like that was kind of why it was the scapegoat, the one that has to go first, right? It's like a war created kind of a vibe. And I could be wrong, but there was also, I wanted to find it, like Humanify. Is that the one it was? I can't even find this thing now. Just give me 2 seconds to like search for something really quickly. I'm trying to see if I can find. There was somebody who was super upset about the White House using it. You saw that the White House used it?
I mean, I think everyone's using it by now, but yeah, maybe I saw one image. I didn't like really look for all of them.
Okay, so this one was, where did it go? Here we go. Okay. I'm gonna start at the top. So, the White House arrested a woman.
Right, I saw this one, yeah.
For ICE. ICE is gonna export this Virginia Pessoa Gonzalez, a previously deported alien.
Actually, aside from what really happened, just the image looks pretty hilarious, I have to say.
It is super funny, right? And it's like, it's cool because this is what AI got out of the picture, and we're getting a lot of these, right? Where it's like, what what about these pictures? What are we learning from? What is AI getting out of the picture? Like, what is it learning from this? And this is some lady who was trafficking fentanyl, right? She was getting people killed with fentanyl. So the White House using this picture was like, wow, this is where we're at now. Like,
as we're on topic, I heard something really interesting from our favorite, well, how do I put this properly? Most unlikely son, Douglas Duane Dietrich. People can check out his channel. He's always doing these 6 to 12-hour streams, talking endlessly. As I like to say, probably at least 30% of what he says is accurate. You know, not saying he's deliberately saying anything wrong, but you know, some of the things are quite out there. But one of the things he recently related, because I sometimes just randomly tune in, I can't listen to all of it, and it's, you know, this and that, different things. But he mentioned that there is actually an issue with the VA, which is the Veterans Administration, and he claims that part of the problem with fentanyl is actually due to VA individuals getting more or less unlimited prescriptions because their system is so old. It's like still running on punch cards or whatever, just as we spoke about. And you can like go to one doctor, get a prescription. You can go to the next one, you get another one. And then you can just, you know, collect all of them, sell them. It's getting ground up. And that's supposedly one of the ways that, let's just say, exacerbates the problem. So it's not exactly clear. Of course, I can't possibly know, but especially if you only need low dosages and you can get like 10x the amount, and you can just give it away, you can sell it, and that could actually make the problem even worse.
I'm sure that would, but also I think that like they're finding like hundreds of thousands of tons or whatever. Like they'll find huge amounts in San Diego in a big warehouse. So it's a little different when there's clearly synthetic manufacturing of like by the kilos, like the thousands of like hundreds and thousands of kilos. But yeah, for sure, we have bad infrastructure. Florida is known for that, for doctors that don't check across for other doctors. And, you know, a lot of doctors go to Florida to retire. They just like set up a phone prescription farm out there, put their numbers in books, and then people will call everyone $100 each prescription, you know, exactly. Thank you, Jack. Yeah, this lady said fascism weaponizes art to dehumanize Ghibli, teaches us to humanize. So she's upset that these pictures are fascistic, aka, you know, something she doesn't like, I guess. But Ghibli teaches us to humanize. She's saying that it's wrong to see this art style because it humanizes. It's not just a crime, it's a mistake, right? That's what she's trying to say. To which I responded, to humanize finding life and to humanize and find life even in struggle is a quote from Mein Kampf. You know, so
yeah, maybe the meta on all of this is the question, of course, to what extent is whatever we see on the political stage already a WWE wrestling match anyhow, and it's already so abstract, and this just makes it more obvious, how should I say, how far we are actually removed from any reality in terms of what we are being presented. Because someone could say, oh, now it looks like a fantasy movie. Well, didn't you realize that before it already looked like a fantasy or sci-fi movie? And most likely what's going on in the back end is slightly different from what you're being presented.
Your brain's starting to realize it's all a lie. You're like, no, this part's not a lie, right? Yeah, basically. Oh, that's sad. Oh, well. Yeah. So I hope that we get past the Ghibli meme pretty soon, but I hope we come up with something even cooler to trend on, right? So Perplexity wants to buy TikTok and open source its algorithm. The AI search startup laid out its bid for buying, rebuilding TikTok. So Perplexity is the AI you use a lot, right? I've seen you use Perplexity before.
Yeah, I don't use it a lot, but sometimes for certain research. And actually a little later, we'll get into some of that. So for really interesting fringe topics, for example, concerning the JFK thing and what I've been researching and showing on the show, it's not readily giving you any results. So basically the JFK thing was a stage play theory, does not show up when doing a regular search. But then if you specify whom you're looking for exactly and what kind of research, then it does give you a usable summary. And what I just found interesting about this idea is that if it would really were true, that they open source the algorithm and make everything transparent, and then have an apparently quite competent search AI like Perplexity attached to your TikTok or whatever else social media algorithm, then social media may actually make sense again, maybe, if it truly is unbiased in that way and you can tune it yourself. Of course, I'm not holding my breath that anyone's really going to do that, but I just thought that could be an interesting combination.
Yeah, I mean, I look forward to some of these ideas. I don't know if it'll happen, but they want to have a TikTok algorithm transparent, open source, and from scratch, which looks like a cool thing. And if any social media app had an open source, transparent algorithm, that would be night and day different from what we see all the time. I don't know if people will, I don't see how that can make as much money as mind control, but hey, you know what? Maybe they can make it so that you can choose to control your own mind or something. I look forward to seeing this. I really hope it works out. That'd be cool. Also, an army bot of scammers scams.
So we're still on the AI topic. This guy is kind of popular for calling Indian call centers and wasting their time and like trying to scam scammers back.
Nice.
Although I have to say by now, if we understand the broader ideas of how, for example, developing countries get exploited, I have to say I almost have some empathy, at least, even for those scammers. Like, how do they get around to the idea of doing it? Because to what extent
a lot of them are being forced to.
Well, that's the other thing. But to what extent did India or developing countries as a whole get scammed? Especially looking at the recent presentations by David Young Jr., where he's proposing that many immigrants that are coming to Europe actually, and that would explain why many of them have smartphones and so on, simply get to or led on. Either they, if they don't have money, they get a low-paying job where they have to pay extra illegal fees for job referrals and so on, just so they can pick your fruit, because the Englishman or the Austrian or the German doesn't want to do it. Or those that have money are being led on with the idea that, yeah, of course you can stay in Europe and so on. But it's actually clear from the first day that they can't. And then just for 3 years, they pay, basically they bleed out all their money and then they're being sent back.
You've heard of the Golden Triangle Economic Zone, right? This is the spot that's in between Laos and Cambodia and Myanmar.
I'm thinking of the North Korean, South Korean economic zone, but I guess it's a similar situation.
This is a kind of so you can see this guy, this like British rich dude who gets to like have fun, and I'll be sure to be jealous of him. Tycoons and Triad boss Zhao Wei, right? Zhao Wei, he created this economic zone, and it's known for smuggling cocaine, heroin, fentanyl, every drug really, methamphetamine, marijuana even around the world, to different places, usually from like Laos and from these like smaller countries. But sometimes the synthetic stuff, everything is coming from China as well. But they will go build entire Breaking Bad style pharmaceutical labs in different countries, in the mountains or in the cities or whatever. And it's just they're in this little economic zone that's right in between everything else. So they don't have to really they're not part of the rest of the nations there, and they're protected by the gangsters who have their own kind of like military police force because it's so big. Anyway, one of the things that happens here is they take people from it looks like Disneyland, right? They take people from Bangladesh, India, other countries, and like North China, things like that. They kidnap them, they steal their passports, and then they take them on boats to the Golden Triangle, and then they make them work as scammers, and they can never leave ever again, really. I mean, a lot of the time you're just stuck here forever. And yeah, their jobs are to scam. They have a quota for how many people they have to scam. Their heart's clearly not in their work, but there are like, and I know that's not everybody. There surely are, just you go to India and like there are call centers that are filled with people that this is like their whole life, because there's some rule, right, that it's not karma over the phone. There's no karma over the phone, right? That is, they say that, so they get away with it. But yeah, for the most part, in a lot of circumstances, these are people that have had their lives taken from them, and they're forced to scam you all day on the phone. It's crazy.
What this reminds me of, I still have to verify this, but supposedly the Kennedy family was part of the robber baron clique in even in official mainline history, and that this could have been one of the reasons why Kennedy officially was against the Vietnam War. Reminds me of what's happening over there, because they were producing their stuff. And even now, I mean, thinking of how righteous America is with its great military and so on, where is the invasion? It's not going to happen. And then I want to know, how does America profit from this actually? If we leave the naive belief that there is truly strong ideological borders between all the countries and not some kind of interconnections occurring.
You put up Sailor Moon, but it won't let me play it. So let me find out.
It's okay. So basically, we don't have to play it. It's just the intro somehow. Yeah, because I recently showed it to a friend. But yeah, anyways, if we play it, we probably get copyrighted. So don't really play it. But why I want to point this out, and everyone can look this up themselves, is because did you know that for many Japanese animations played in Germany or Austria, actually pause it because I think, otherwise we have to cut it out later. They actually use Eurodance tracks. So oftentimes the intros for the German 90s animations, the songs may even be better or more energetic than the original Japanese versions. And some of them really are hyped up. So you can imagine how all the German-speaking kids coming home like da 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 da, it's almost like being at a rave party or something.
You have double the tempo for this than Sailor Moon. Sailor Moon had almost but this is like boom 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 boom.
And there's quite a few animations that have that. So if anyone wants to listen to some good Eurodance, check out the 90s animation German version of the intro songs.
God, that's awesome.
Oh, yes. So here we had spoken about her before, where it wasn't exactly clear because I didn't have all the information. This is a great article explaining it. So this is apparently one of the first transgender individuals that got like high up on the world stage. And apparently here, even as it says, a Chinese army colonel. So it's not a random, I wanted to say dude, but how should I say? This is obviously some sort of an operation that you put. I guess this would have to be a PLA colonel, however that works.
So this trans person was a military colonel that became trans, or like that transitioned? Is that what we're saying here?
Well, if anything, I want to say they transitioned into a higher rank when they transitioned or something.
Right. Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're officially even charged right now, but it's just a very strange occurrence, because I had mentioned that apparently even in countries like Pakistan,
colonel in the army,
Africa, they are promoting this, and this is just one of the early examples where I'm like, how is this even possible? Is China pro-trans even, or what kind of media op is that? I don't know.
Dude, crazy. Interesting. Of course. All right. And of course people will say psychologically they were just always trying to prove they were men. That's why they did these manly things like being in the military. Okay, Onagata.
So this, as I just spoke about Japan, if I remember correctly, when I visited, I actually saw one of those shows, because recently I spoke to friends about this and was like, at least what you can see in, I guess, on parades often enough, or in clubs where you have drag queens, at least to my aesthetic, they are usually, how should I say, I don't find them very aesthetic, let's just say, or it's usually quite crass. It's quite how do you call that in German? You say the word Verrohung. It's not exactly debasement, but like it's not refined, but the opposite of refined. That's the impression that I get when seeing any of that. But you do have
it's like when white people wear blackface or something. It's like, okay, this is your idea of what you think it is to be a
refined version of this in Japan, which is apparently called Onagata, where you have only male actors playing like an opera or whatever it is. But it's, at least from what I remember, that had like, I don't know, more class to it, but maybe it's just because it's the Japanese and they just have more class. And officially it's because at some point females were banned from performing in theater plays. At least that's what they say.
Well,
But then
it's true.
again,
It only happened in like
reminds me,
1629. So it's not like an ancient tradition
yeah,
or something. It happened very shortly after the Dutch and British and there was the Portuguese and the Spanish had taken over huge parts of Japan. Japan had a war with Portugal and with Spain. They had some sort of a trade deal set up with the non-state company, the Dutch East Indies Company, right? So that was the only group that could trade at any of the ports. In one port, I think, or two ports that were set up that the Dutch could actually go through, that the emperor controlled. And then just after that, they started doing the same traditions as people like the Dutch and English did, where they had male-only theater, right? And they had men in drag for all of Shakespeare's plays, which was simultaneously going on. So it's not
again,
a tradition. It's crazy, really.
Oddfellows again, and of course, First Lady Boys of the United States, with which we've shown before. I will continue to harp on this until people, are aware of this or look at this and properly verify it.
Jesuits. Def not Eric Debate
Well,
says. All right. Calm down, bro. Just kidding.
So yeah, last section for the whole trans. This is actually what I want to see more of, because I've been looking into this idea just because, again, not because I'm against anyone dressing differently or declaring themselves to be whatever. Ideally, if they don't then come along and are rude and so on and force other people to do things they don't want to. But here, basically, there's different ways to determine whether someone is biologically male or female. And it's not always exactly, how should I say, an exact science. But the one part, which may be the most accurate part, it's actually called gait analysis. And I find that highly interesting because, at least if you're walking normally, apparently, due to the skeletal structure that you are born with, that your biological gender is correlating to, you walk in a different way. So females basically would walk one step across the other like this in one straight line, and males would supposedly walk more, like this, like more military style or whatever. And then all I can say is look at different famous individuals and look at their gait, look at their shoulder waist ratio and so on. And yeah, we've spoken about this before, but it still kind of baffles me. Even if only 10% of the cases presented online are correct, it would be a lot, and it would be an incredible way to, I still think,
like a man. Basically.
Yeah, mock the population. I'm not sure, in terms of, all the world is a stage. How can people be so ignorant they don't even realize the people we put up on the screen and stylize into the best sex symbols may actually be of a different gender than what individuals through the TV presume.
We'd have to test this more, because this would have to be tested against people that identify and present as a different gender, and probably over a period of time as well. Have you seen the Soviet domesticated fox experiments?
It kind of rings a bell, but please show me.
Okay, domesticated foxes, Soviet. Let's see what I can find. Soviet scientist Dmitry Belyaev in the 1950s. I'm not sure, if I can find how much Wikipedia is going to tell you about this, but basically, eugenics was considered classist, and the Soviet Union was very much against genetic data and genomics and the idea of DNA. Stalin really frowned upon this in the 50s. So they were trying to push against those studies. So Belyaev did this study where he told them that he was just trying to groom and breed better fur foxes, and hiding what his actual research was until the 70s. So for 20 years, he was doing this breeding program where he was really just trying to breed foxes that were more friendly. So he'd put 10 foxes out and offer them food. And then the foxes that got angry or cowered away or whatever, he didn't breed them. But the ones that looked more and appreciated the food, within 4 generations, he had domesticated foxes by just breeding for this one trait of being more friendly to persons. And eventually they started looking different. They had their nose got smaller, their eyes got wider, they got cuter in all sorts of ways. They had like white furs and things started to emerge different colors, but thousands of different genes started to turn on that had literally the only difference had been he was breeding for this one trait. This one trait had a bunch of other things tied together. And eventually the foxes were, I mean, in the 70s, they were selling them as pets in the Soviet Union, for sure. Let me see if I can find the domesticated silver fox of Novosibirsk. You can see they look like dogs. They actually evolved to have a lot of ranges of sounds. Foxes don't really communicate in sounds. They tripled their life expectancy. They doubled their breeding habits. They went from annual breeding to biannual breeding periods, and their breeding periods both doubled or tripled in length. So they're basically most of the year in breeding, and they're constantly learning new tricks and everything else. They're basically dogs at this point. And this is look at this. This is the domesticated Belyov fox. So I mean, there's something to me that says also, like, if you were to look at people from the West who've evolved in metropolitan zones, right? Like, people from cities and around cities, suburbs around cities, then you've got more likely a chance that, I mean, this happened only in about 4 generations. It was very quick that these epigenetic traits started to emerge. So if you incentivized any sort of change to the human structure, the human hierarchy, the human sociological needs, like we have in Western society, it's pretty logical that you would have changes in the human genome that were rewarded traits because they're not living in a natural paradigm. And we could probably call that domestication or reverse, evolution. But it's, thinking about ways people walk, I think for sure in San Francisco, you're probably going to see some people walk ways that are different.
Or just domestication of humans by living 2, 3, 4 generations in cities. Also a big question. How much does the genome change even epigenetically within one lifetime? And then, how do all these habits that you just mentioned change from thinking of, let's say, a caveman or whatever? And also how many of those would turn on again if people would live differently? So that's definitely an interesting field of investigation, something to consider.
I don't have an actual picture of it, but I was at an ice cream shop in Sausalito, just in San Francisco, Bay Area there. And I saw some obese man in a leather sort of outfit with a chain being guided around by his friend or whatever that means, like a Mr. Garrison, Mr. Slave kind of thing. And the way that they were walking was definitely suspect, right? I'm not sure if AI would have picked it up as male or female. So, just saying.
Yes.
All right. So beyond that, we looked at Bear, good old Owen Benjamin, Beartaria, Darkness.
Yeah. So here, how should I say? I wish I wouldn't have to bring these things up because it just wouldn't exist. But basically here, the question is brought up. People can check this out by themselves. How should I say? Whether people that put themselves in the front and create systems and so on and say they want to buy land and all of that and put out their name, how should I say, especially if they are former Hollywood actors or related, whether or not they are completely free of narcissistic tendencies and whether or not they use the funds that they get in a way that really aligns with the mission they outwardly propose. I think,
man, if you were 7 feet tall and you could play the piano like this guy, Owen Benjamin's, pretty popular around these parts. I gotta be careful. But yeah, what's your concern with this guy? He basically was blacklisted, blackballed, you could say, blackballed from the lodge by Joe Rogan, who was his friend theoretically, and then invited him on his podcast and then kind of just destroyed his career as much as possible, basically, and like leading him into like these like pretty racist questions and things like that. Having said that, he also has made it pretty hard for himself because he basically just attacks everyone all the time. That's what he does. But he also moved away from the city because he wasn't getting anywhere with that. Kind of created a revolving door platform where he gets his show taken down, his channel deleted, his handle on social media destroyed every few months, and then he has to build it up all again. So like it's very slash and burn, shut down your tower kind of thing. Owenites, right? Yeah, okay. And so yeah, he's also very clear about the fact that he is an anti-Semitic Jew, like he himself is Jewish, but loves the Jewish people, but also, calls them out all the time. I mean, basically he makes the most Jewish jokes of anyone on the internet, like except for maybe Roseanne Barr. Right.
So, well, the whole question here simply is, having a certain public persona, but then it seems that he has amassed quite some funds and also land, which, as I understand, is all in his name.
Yeah.
And basically the question is, whether whatever he's proposing in building there is actually living up to the expectations, and whether or not, because he has like acres and acres now, and apparently he's still asking for more. So then it's also a question, how much can I use the idea of being deplatformed and so on, to funnel a certain demographic and shell out big amounts of money with an unknown return on investment for those that actually contribute, but a certain
Is there supposed to be a return on investment? I don't know. Is there supposed to be? Does he promise people anything?
If I'm even only talking about, having a place there, being secure there, and living well there, I'm just saying there's all kinds of questions about this. So I just had to bring it up. People can check it out.
Yeah, I mean, like, their own minds. I think IJack says he's grifted over $30 million since 2019. Is that true? 30 million?
That's like what the documentary seems to allude to, yes.
Bro, I mean, like, I don't know. That's pretty based.
That's pretty not bad,
right?
But then the question is, to what extent? No, I'm not. But to what extent?
Owen fans know what they're getting into. Phil gets this. Owen fans know exactly what they're getting into. If you're following this guy, well, because have you ever seen the way he talks? Do you watch any of his actual? Watch him on Twitter. Like he's like going to be on Twitter today, probably playing his piano, saying horrible things about Mexicans. Actually, the last thing he did was say that all the Jews he know have never been named Jesus. He's known Jews named like Azazel and like weird fairy names from the Lord of the Rings, but he doesn't know any Jews named Jesus. He only knows Mexicans named Jesus. And that made sense to him that Jesus was Mexican because Jesus worked all the time. And I don't know, like these are the kind of things he says. It's just completely.
I just spoke about this. You literally have nobody in German-speaking regions being called Jesus. He'd just call him Christian.
Muhammad,
but there's no Jesus here.
Sure. Yeah, Muhammad.
Well, Muhammad, of course, we have a lot.
Let's not talk about that. That's not what I'm saying. I don't know. Owen Benjamin, we've had on the show before. You should probably watch the episode that we did together. I would like to do another one with him, actually, because he says some interesting stuff. Here, I think he's live right freaking now. You know what I mean? Like, he goes live for hours and hours and hours, just sitting there in his homestead. This is his homestead. I mean, hold on. Let's take a little look at what he's saying right now.
Choose to be bad. It's because it's a coping mechanism. Unfortunately, I don't think I do it, but I am always open-minded to self-analyze.
That's the most humble we've ever sounded. That's not right.
I want him back, even though.
Say something racist, man. Come on, show us that you're terrible. No,
even though he made me feel like I'm just not as valuable as I kind of feel I am. So
okay,
why the hell don't you want to help out at the festival? What? Because someone was mean to you, Gagan?
Okay, like so. This is. I don't. I mean, to me, he just seems. I mean, that's what he does. He just sits there. He's got like 7 kids, and he's built a farm, and he's showing people his farm. And if people want to pay him to show his farm, or his feet, or his fingers on the piano, that's fine. I feel like there's no reason that's wrong. He's not like saying, hey, unless I'm missing something here. I don't think he said like, hey, I'm gonna give you an apartment. This isn't like the $100 billion Malaysian ghost city that he's building in the Appalachians or something like that. He's just trying to get kind of proof that you can homestead and fight the government if you have enough optics on you, right? Because they tried to say he wasn't allowed to have this kind of garden, or they say, you have to tear down your water supply, or because, in America, you have a lot of encroachments on your rights. It's not just like it's free to do what you want to do in America. And so you have to have permits for this, and the city has to accept this or that. Yeah, exactly.
In the non-Muslim regions. In the
Dude,
Christian
Owen
regions.
built the Malaysian ghost city. That's it, Owen. You're gonna have to defend yourself on this one. You must have built the Malaysian ghost city. But who else would do it, right? Man bear is like Owen's the man. He's the bear. He's the man bear pig. Okay, all right, fair enough.
Well, all I know, he's got acres upon acres, and apparently is asking for more. So
good, bro. Yeah, get as many acres as you can get,
if
bro.
he puts it to good use or not. What,
bro? I mean, like, I hope he doesn't. I hope he doesn't. I literally hope he does not put the land to good use. I hope he lets the land be land. That was literally that. Now you're making me want to give him money, bro. Like, you don't even understand. If he just doesn't do anything with that land, that's way better than all of these big corporations that are doing stuff with the land. Please do not do anything. Let the land be land. I don't know. Whatever. I hope I literally hope that land is done. Nothing happens to it except that he wanders through it on a 4x4 with his son. You know what I mean?
Yeah, all I can say is I really wish with all these individuals that apparently get banned and so on, and they have been popular before and they espouse a certain personality or a certain ideology, that they would 100% stick to it. But I guess, what I will say as a generic defense, of course, anytime you get together with other individuals you don't necessarily know so well, of course, later it can turn out, maybe they're not exactly the way that you imagined them to be. I'll just keep it at that.
I don't think he ever said he was a
communist
that was going to like share the land. I don't know. I think this is all a huge misunderstanding. It's starting to sound like, but
I hope so.
I mean, all right. Well, David Copperfield, though, he's real, right?
Yeah, he's so real. So in the same vein,
this is just funny. I never saw this before. This is hilarious. What's even happening right now?
Because many years back, I had heard about Copperfield, of course. I guess that's, without internet, without anyone really checking it, without anyone explaining anything. And everyone just knew, oh my God, he's the greatest illusionist of all time, this and that. But this is an interesting documentary because it basically explains all the different methods that he's used, some quite simple even, to create certain illusions, especially, of course, if you only have one camera angle, then you can easily determine reality. And everyone should, take the cue. Anything you see on TV or on a screen can be manufactured.
I always wondered about Charles Dickens' David Copperfield, right? Because there's a book by the guy who did like Oliver and Twist, and what's the other one? The Christmas Carol, right? And he has a book called David Copperfield, which is like 100 and 200 years old or something like this, from 1850, right? So it's pretty crazy to me that there's David Copperfield, before David Copperfield. Not sure that's really
a big surprise, yeah.
Yeah, okay. So what, David Copperfield's not real. He's not like David Blaine, right? David Blaine's for real.
He can't actually float, and once you know the tricks, of course, it's like, oh, of course, so simple. This summer got recommended to me, and I was like, oh, of course, I know of the name. Let's see what's going on
here. This is how David Copperfield did all of his tricks. They're
yes,
like all exposed.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I feel like every kid should have to learn this stuff in like kindergarten to first grade, so that you don't get scammed the rest of your life, basically, and then you can scam non-Americans with your public school education.
Yeah, pretty much.
Right? I mean, yeah, and I'd also like to see like what percentage of CEOs and famous people like Steve Jobs and Bill Gates took magic classes when they were very, very young. Because I know Bill Gates' big skill is cards. That's literally what he's best at. Hey, look, Harrison Ford with David freaking
I can
Blaine.
believe that he's better at that than at programming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, he probably did program the solitaire card game for Windows 95, though. DMT laser simulation tutorial. Okay.
So I'm not sure if you heard about this. Apparently, this guy, I still have to investigate this more,
he
but
stares at a laser.
Oh my God. Yeah, supposedly like with heightened DMT or something, and also I guess refracting it through water, people seem to see similar patterns or something. So it's like the exploration of whether you can see similar things in altered mind spaces. I'm not claiming I've completely figured out what's going on here yet, but this is quite interesting and something to look more at. So if there's actually like some type of universal coding that can be seen, because I think here they literally say they see code. I know different individuals had experiences where they also say they see formulas and stuff like that. But it's like supposed to be a control type experiment where you would then see, I guess, similar things or something like that. So
interesting.
I'm surprised you hadn't heard about it. I have to look at this deeper, but this is kind of recent, only somewhat popular. But of course, it's always interesting with these altered mind states if they're actually, we also access a common reality or common symbolism or whatever is going on.
Real Deal says lasers programmed to 555. Really? Not 666? Have you seen like 666 nanometer red laser light is just about that shade, right? Show me some color images. See, like, there you go. Like, it's pretty much the red that you're most familiar with and is the best for your skin is 666 nanometer. So I don't know. Look at 555. I'm kind of curious. Why 555? If you got any explanation, explain. All right. So then, are you? What's this? Sorry. Oh
yeah. So of course,
seers.
Another thing that doesn't exist, and we don't even need to talk a lot about it, but just shout out, everyone be aware that this exists. You know, we had similar war games going on before. Actually, we can just go on because there's not much I want to say about this. I'll just, how should I say? The only thing I can say is I hope it's not gonna come to pass.
This is like a remote viewing of the future, a severe epidemic. Yeah. Enter viral respiratory syndrome. So they're working
on because of course, you know, our world controllers are very caring and so on. So they, you know, try to.
I just want to show you this really quickly then for a second. Here's the futurists with scientists from the RAND Corporation. Did I ever show you this?
To be shown.
I actually had McGraw-Hill as one of the notes, but I took it out again. McGraw-Hill is like one of the.
Well, we got to talk about McGraw-Hill.
Publishing masters, right?
That's the building on the JFK assassination block. That's the room that Lee Harvey Oswald was in the McGraw-Hill text building. He was literally all the books behind him. They're all McGraw-Hill books.
Genetic control, 20% probability. 0-1, yes, here's the unlikely event that became true, and I just go on through the others the same way.
This is not a crap game. It's a serious game at the University of Pittsburgh about the year 2001. Rolling the dice is Dr. Olaf Helmer of the RAND Corporation. With Theodore Gordon, he is conducting a simulation exercise. A panel of experts has studied a list of possible 21st century developments, from personality-controlled drugs to household robots. They have estimated the numerical probability of each, from 0 to 100%. The 20-sided dice are then rolled to simulate these probabilities, a use of random numbers known as the Monte Carlo technique, and often used in think tank games.
Dungeons
All
and
of
Dragons
this is highly speculative.
Say again?
Dungeons and Dragons dice, the D20, yeah.
Absolutely correct. The Dungeons and Dragons is a think tank game. In and of that self, that should be interesting.
Technique, and often used in think tank games. All of this is highly speculative, but the game serves a useful function. It encourages talented people to think about the future, the current fascination of a new intellectual breed, the futurists.
So we wind up with a world which has the following features. We have fertility control, 100-year lifespan, controlled thermonuclear power, continued automation, genetic control, man-machine symbiosis, household robots, wideband communications, opinion control, and continued urbanization.
So yeah, definitely check out The Futurist from 1967 if you're interested in that kind of thing. Okay, and the next video here is the Statlichboot.
Oh yeah, so this is something we can talk about because it's on German mainstream TV.
Good.
So I don't know to what extent this occurred in the US as well, but as I may have related previously, Austria especially actually had the highest testing for coronavirus per capita. Not gonna get into the virology details here. Everyone who wants to know more about that, check out NEUROPA No Entry Part 2, especially. But basically here what they say is that in the beginning, they basically told everyone, oh, why don't you open a test center? You know, use the, what's it called? RT-PCR tests developed by Drosten in Germany, which was the approved test worldwide, I guess, and the only test to be approved, really. And then they said, well, just open a center. And big surprise, because they gave out so much money so quickly, there were individuals not really doing that properly, and even creating centers where they didn't even actually do any tests. Although I also once saw like an underground report from the biggest test center in Austria, and even there what they had shown was like they were basically not test center, sorry. Test center would be the place where you go to take the test, but like the biggest laboratory in Vienna or something where they were supposedly verifying the tests, or how do you call it, analyzing the tests to determine whether it's positive or negative according to their method and standards. And in that huge center, or pretty big center, they almost only employed some sort of students, so it wasn't really qualified medical personnel. They had stuff laying around in the boxes, mixed up, this and that, and even the effing coffee machine there was moldy, you know. So but here what they basically complain about is to say, oh, look, there were these evil individuals who scammed a few millions by opening testing stations which didn't actually test anyone, or they just put something different on the accounting and they got more money than they should have.
We should have done that.
It's kind of, yeah, it's kind of cute because it's like the most low-level, low-ball variant of corruption, which concerns, you know, regular everyday citizens who just wanted to ride the wave and were like, well, I'm also going to scam a few millions if this is already going on. But of course, it's a big diversion from the multiple levels of much higher level scams going on here.
Totally.
So it's kind of cute.
Interesting.
Thanks for becoming a member on Xirtus channel. Semi in the passing lane.
Ooh.
School world order.
Very cool. Thank you for being here. China's vanishing population in the live 1.4 billion people. Right, when there's like maybe 0.25, so 0.25 now. They think it might be less, like almost reaching parity with the United States, maybe lower.
I think she's proposing even 400 or 500 million less. In her understanding, this was because of the coronavirus. I'll just leave it at that. It's not exactly analyzed in this video, you know, what the real causes could be. But what's interesting is you have all these apparently real individuals just filming in their own city and being like, haven't you noticed? There's no one here anymore. Like, people don't even go grocery shopping. I think in Shanghai, it's especially a big situation that whole districts closed down. This was even some years ago, I think. But that in many cities, apparently, at least the so-called first-tier cities, it appears there is a lot less people than previously. And even the Chinese themselves are wondering on their social media where all the people have gone.
Dang. That'd be crazy. Empty Shanghai. Wow. I mean, that's kind of nice, though. I mean, you get a lot of empty streets. You can just imagine maybe the people are inside all the time, or we're really thinking that they're just not there anymore.
That would be one consideration, but they say, well, at least even if you don't go to the restaurant all day, yeah, you would at least maybe use public transport or go to the grocery store or something. So I can't exactly say what's going on, but I find it curious, and as so often, you cannot necessarily trust statistics.
Yeah. But yeah, the population.
And that's another part. It's actually something I heard about MSG. Of course, you have Uncle Roger on YouTube, where I'm still wondering whether he's being paid by MSG companies, because in his cooking videos, he's always like, oh, make the chicken very nice, this and that, fuyo. And then We need the most important ingredient, MSG. And then he pulls like a bag of it over it. And one friend recently been to Thailand, and apparently there also all of the street food seems to be infested with this wonderful substance, which supposedly makes the umami taste.
You guys don't have MSG? Is it illegal in Austria or
well,
something
it's
like
not.
that? You
Well,
don't have this? What?
We have it, but why not
25 kilograms of MSG? That's wild, bro. Come on.
Why not use real spices and whatever else to create that taste, and
Bro,
rather
because
use a synthetic chemical,
isn't
which, from what I
don't
understand,
you need MSG to hit certain receptors? Isn't that the whole point?
I'm
I
sure
thought the whole point was it's the only thing that could hit that one receptor. It's the only thing that scratches that far behind your back, you know?
Probably, but maybe it's a little bit too far, just as if you would stick up something up your nose, which was very popular during the Corona time in Austria. Well, everyone has to know themselves whether that's a recommended health practice or not.
I don't know. I mean, look at it's like little shards of glass, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, tasty.
It's hard to just be saying like, no, you shouldn't have MSG because look how happy it makes people, you know?
I'm wondering, is RFK not talking about it? He's only talking about Red 50, but not about that one.
I don't think MSG is bad for you. I don't want to take like a hard take on this one. Not just like because I'm not a medical nutritionist or anything, but just because I don't think MSG is necessarily bad for you. Like I haven't heard of it causing deaths or heart attacks or all these other things, right?
Well, all I can recommend, I mean, not recommend everyone, just try it and see how you feel afterwards. All I know is that in Austria, at least, they always say it's like the Chinese restaurant
syndrome
ailment or something.
Chinese restaurant syndrome, yeah.
Because they put it in and people then feel strange and they feel bloated or something like that. I'll see.
Ooh, CNN says MSG isn't unhealthy. You're just racist.
That's great. Well, that's all we need to know. That's all we need to know. So, guys, just that's it.
God. All right. I mean, but what if she's right, dude? Like, that's the thing. I don't know. Okay, MSG. I've had it a few times in my life. I'll admit. I don't hate it. I don't know. I don't go out of my way to get MSG to have in my own kitchen.
Well, all I can relay as an individual experience is a friend of mine been in Thailand, going to the street vendors and so on, just eating regularly, generally being very healthy, and then being very surprised why was sick for several weeks, and eventually then coming in contact with organic farmers which are more well off, and then realizing that even in Thailand now there's about 10% of restaurants that are specifically labeled as MSG free. Make of this what you will. You know, probably it's just an allergy due to microplastics, right? If you want to believe it, you can believe it. So, muted.
Fair enough. What about this? Microbiome engineers?
Yeah, so this is maybe contentious or not. Some people in the comments say, oh, this is just some, research ideas or something. But basically the question, to what extent is there a microbiome gut-brain axis? I mean, that this exists, I think by now is kind of accepted. But the real question would be, to what extent do certain individuals or power groups try to influence that? I haven't read through the paper itself yet, but since we've spoken before about the idea of Internet of Things and in what ways potentially humans may be influenced by technology that is known and the technology that is lesser known, this is... Let me just put it like this, even with the food, just as we spoke about it now, if it were my aim to influence individuals, then I would certainly go for the gut biome, because the gut biome is incredibly important for overall health. Like I said, by now in the last few years, this even got accepted in the mainstream. So of course, depending on what you put into your body and how you can influence that, would have a great effect on individuals' health. And also, I would claim, ability to think clearly. So, let's just
that makes sense. Mind control is good, but gut biome control, we control your subconscious more too. Go with your gut. So controlling someone's mind's not enough. You gotta control the gut.
Oh yeah, here I just wanted to bring up on this China thing. Please go to minute 54. That's all I want to show here.
Sound or?
Okay, so now let's consider that, because these guys, they are basically saying, oh, look, you know, some people on the internet are claiming in China everything is better, they have better social programs and so on. Of course, none of them could ever be motivated by the, what's it called? PLA or PLC or CCP to promote anything like that. But still, how should I say, if we look at the other side of the medal, it is quite curious, because look at the prices here. So for example, heart attack treatment, you pay 10,000 up to 200,000. Heart surgery, you pay this and that. Let's not even consider, you know, why these things are happening or what occurred that you would need such a type of operation.
Why is it so expensive in China to get? I thought they had like social medicine and stuff. No.
Or maybe at least that's from one hospital, but what I just find interesting, regardless of who now has to pay this or not, I just find the listing of prices so interesting, because if that's what it costs in the back end or front end or whatever in China, what is the cost incurred in America or in westernized countries? And I maybe gave this example before, that in one case a friend hurt himself and went to the hospital, had to call the ambulance and so on, because it was a, you know, severe enough bodily trauma, basically a cut. And then after this whole thing happened, they like stitched him up or whatever, and they sent a bill. This was in Austria, and the bill was for 800 euros, which is something, but all right, you know. And the hospital, of course, said, well, please send this to your insurance, basically, so they can cover it. And then when he replied, well, for whatever reason, I'm not perfectly insured, actually, what did they do?
Walk him out? Just kick him out?
No, this was already after everything is done, because even, at least in Austria, maybe also in America, you even have hospitals that will actually treat you even if you have no insurance at all. So there is, at least in some senses, apparently still some individuals that take the Hippocratic Oath seriously, or whatever other incentive they have. But what did they do? They said, all right, you don't have an insurance, no problem. We're going to send you a new bill. And how much was the new bill?
Like half of it, hopefully, or less?
$200 or
Okay.
euros.
Sweet.
So I'm like, I want to know what is the actual cost of this, and why is there ultra premium surcharge?
It probably can get some of the money elsewhere. They can probably say that this person's poor and get it done by the, you know, state. There's probably some way to get some money from different state sources in circumstances, right? But it's like more paperwork, probably.
That is a good potential. But still, I'm like, looking at even the Chinese prices, I'm wondering, is this really so expensive? And as we brought up on the show Phoenix Force with Keith Colley, everyone recommended to check it out. We mentioned is that 2/3 of individual bankruptcies in the US are actually due to medical bankruptcies. And all I always want to know is, wouldn't you have been able to spend 20% of the money or the bills that now made you bankrupt on better lifestyle, you know, better food and less stress and all these other things, which maybe, only maybe, would have led you down a different path, that you wouldn't need the super expensive cancer treatment, let's say. There's a reason they call it a treatment, right? Or is there any hospital that offers a cancer cure? I don't know. So yeah, just saying.
I guess China has like a multi-layered system for healthcare. So they have urban employee basic medical insurance, which is mandatory for urban employees. So everyone who lives in like cities have to get into the UEBMI, and that, you know, is covered by employers and employees for a portion of the expenses, and doesn't have fully free services, and have to pay out of pocket for co-payments, deductibles, or uncovered treatments similar to Medicare, you know, in the United States. Also, urban residents basic medical insurance, URBMI, a voluntary program for urban residents not covered by the UEBMI, like children, students, and elderly, and subsidized by the government, but still required premiums and includes cost sharing. And then the NRCMS, New Rural Cooperative Medical Scheme, designed for rural residents, heavily subsidized by the government, but participants pay a small fee and face co-payments for services. So kind of interestingly similar to what a lot of people have in America, especially after 2008.
Wait, Andreas, are you saying America is communist?
For sure. Yeah. Definitely. And what's weird is like most of the time it's the Republicans who invented these like communist systems. It's like neo-Marxist, neoconservative, international Marxist. Okay. All right. So here, yeah. So basically, not just that, but we're also paying into it. So not quite communist per se. It's more like mandatory feudalist, state-controlled corporatism. Hopefully it's efficient. I don't know. So they're arguing over the cost of things. All right. And then this is the... Oh, we did the wolf thing already. There was... let's go back further, huh? Wow, we got through all of those. All right.
Yes.
Then crown. Did we do crown?
No, we got that, yeah.
Okay, so then we're arm Easturia. Okay. Okay, we'll go there. So here... See if it'll let me translate it. This page cannot be translated, huh? Okay.
Look at the picture. What could this be about?
Money.
Yes, it's about money. And I'm not sure how well this relates to the other topics in that section, but probably does somehow. What's funny is that especially for Austria, they often say, oh, in Austria, individuals are, even on average, strangely enough, they are so, how should I say, medical intervention hesitant in terms of inoculations, like historically speaking. And they also say that Austrians and maybe Germans to some extent are very hesitant to adopt digital payment systems.
Right.
So it's kind of interesting. It almost seems like the mainland of Europe, at least the Austrian-speaking countries, or sorry, German-speaking countries, are, how do you call that? Like, let's just say very conservative in terms of wanting to progress down the lanes that are being proposed. So I just wanted to point that out, but you can go on to the next one. That's how this section is called ARM. East Styria. It's not about the microprocessor architecture, which I guess only you and I thought about here anyways. But what I wanted to show is that you have these individuals in Austria. For example, Katrin Glock. She is the heiress to the Glock company. You know, Glock, which makes the pistols and the small arms. And from what I understand, they even supply the US police forces or something like that. So it's quite famous. And all made me think of is like, yeah, well, makes sense. You know, if Germany and Austria are remote colonies, then of course you also give them some heavy industry or whatever, you know, to obfuscate and whatever else. And what I just wanted to point out here, what's so funny, because before she took over the company, she had this horse breeding, which I guess is also a, you know, interesting thing. Also historically, of course, with the horses and the Ottoman and so on. And she built like a racetrack. And what I just find so cute is that at the very, here you can see she's big in animal welfare. So there is one very famous animal welfare institution for like animals that are sick or something. And the cool thing is, basically she can run a weapons company, then at the side support the most famous of these animal welfare places, and then look at the bottom. Yeah, here are the awards. Look at this. She's got all these awards of how amazing and social and so on she is. Never mind, she's running an arms company. Yeah. see, 2015, this is great. Go up a bit. Prix de l'Humanité. This is the prize of humanity or humanitarian prize. Yeah. Of course, badge of honor for breast cancer aid. I mean, it's such an incredible clown show. It's amazing. Yes, here you have the weapons dealer Glock.
They make really nice,
officially Austrian.
Nice little guns they make there. They're good. Steyr, Daimler, Puch.
Yeah, and these I just wanted to bring up because this is another arms manufacturer from Austria. So just in case you guys wonder where the weapons are coming from, quite a few of them are actually manufactured in Austria. And I think they even make tanks maybe, or certain military vehicles. So I just find it kind of funny because Austria, of course, technically, officially, not really, but officially is a neutral country, right? After the Second World War, it was occupied by France, Britain, America, and Russia, of course.
I want one of these. This seems like a fun little thing to go around with.
And these so-called allies, so we call them the Siegermächte, so the victory powers, are giving the security guarantee to ensure that Austria remains neutral. But seen in a different way, maybe that's exactly the reason why they allowed them to continue manufacturing arms, because it's an officially neutral country, so they can export their weapons to all of the different nations. So every few years, they can fight each other or whatever. So I just find it kind of hilarious that you proclaim your country to be so neutral and all of that, but you're literally producing weapons. And of course, especially
for
with
everybody.
the First Amendment and with an armed populace, there is something by now that I can understand in that vein. But of course, most often, how should I say, it's just questionable if weapons are always truly only used in self-defense, and how often are they used in some kind of fudged wars or oppressive types of policing and all of that. So yeah.
If everyone can buy it, that's just fine, right? They clearly made some cool stuff in the 30s and 20s, so I'm into it. All right. Guten Nacht, Österreich mit Peter Klein.
Yes, so you can pause it. You can go to minute 7 and 20 seconds, and please put on the CC.
Minute and 20 minute. How far?
7 minutes and 20 seconds.
Okay.
And turn on the CC. And wait before you play it. So this guy basically is the Timu version of, I always forget their names. Which are these comedians in America? Which have this kind of shows that look exactly the same.
Jon Stewart and stuff, or Jimmy Fallon, or
yeah, these kind of guys. So he's like, you have these type of supposedly comedy shows which have heavy political bias and only serve to distract you. They are also franchised out, at least in the Western countries. You have Böhmermann in Germany, who is of course bigger because it's German, and then you have your local Austrian budget version. Even if they ever pan the camera towards the studio, there's literally, like, if you're lucky, there's like 50 people sitting there on like 10 rows up and 5 like this, or 5 columns, 10 rows or whatever. It's kind of hilarious. But here, so there was a big scandal, and it's still, to me, unclear how many individuals were actually involved in this. This was about securing the airspace for Austria in early 2000s. They had the idea that this had to be done. There were some strange things going on with the bidding process and all kinds of other big questions, where even individuals that may seem politically opposed or whatever potentially may actually be related. But this, what I just said now, this I really only got from some small-time blogs, but that, to me, that only gives it more credibility. But even officially, there were huge scandals about this and what kind of deals are being made, how much contracts are being done. Basically they said, oh, buy these fighters and then you will get extra business from us or something like this. But here, what I just wanted to show is basically 20 seconds on CC, where because they're now saying, oh, we want to upgrade the Eurofighters, even the name Eurofighters, and especially Austria is so small. I mean, I would totally just lease them from Switzerland or something. For me, it's completely insane that we would even have this. For what and for whom? But yeah, here, basically, they say they now want to upgrade the system. Yeah, and here we can read it. US technology is also installed in the Austrian Eurofighter. And now they're asking one of the generals in Austria, could the US also paralyze our Eurofighters at the push of a button? I don't want to answer that question.
Wow.
So much for Austria being neutral.
Oh, oh my God.
Because now, basically 20 years or yet almost 20 years after we bought them, they're now discussing to upgrade them with what? With night vision goggles. So apparently, supposedly, these super expensive weapon systems didn't even have proper night vision installed. And then you're wondering if all the world is a stage and if everything is a joke. Well, make up your own mind.
They might have had like poor night vision or something like that's different, you know, like maybe we have better digital night vision than we used to. And for the longest time we were using literal optic lenses, and each one of those headsets is like $20,000 or something like that just to wear, not even counting what they would be on like something that has to see like vast distances. But okay.
Yes, so this, now we're at the history section. This is interesting because, of course, I mean, it literally says British on top, so you can think for yourself how well curated these reels will be. I want to see all the reels that they didn't put up here, but this is basically the archive for, I would say, many of the oldest films that are still in existence that supposedly document different things. I can only assume that they are also very carefully selected and very carefully crafted and created, but still it's interesting to check them out if you're ever looking for anything in particular, just to see, because I think they're literally the oldest films that are in circulation. Often in black and white, of course, showing different countries, showing different scenes. I think it starts around 1890. So just for everyone as a reference, if you're ever researching something, here you can see what British Pathé is saying about it. And then, of course, sometimes you have new variants of this which are enhanced with AI. Sometimes you even find them on YouTube. Just an interesting research repository. Again, heavily curated most likely, but interesting nonetheless. What they want you to know, basically. Yeah, so here we've spoken about this last time. This is just for reference that someone else also picked up this idea that could it potentially be that there is something wrong with the JFK thing, and could it possibly be that this was just another stage play? By judging by how little this is even considered at all in the mainstream, my spider sense tells me there is something to it, if not a lot, because now people keep arguing, like you explained, about all these power groups in the background, which surely exist to some extent. But the question remains whether, especially in, which year was it, 67, 63 or something like this?
63.
How difficult would it be to engineer something like that? And then please go to the next link. I didn't know that either. Did you know that RKO Radio Pictures was one of the big 5 film studios? And apparently, let's see if it's on the site itself.
This is what Disney used to release through, right? It used RKO originally to distribute.
And now it's even connects back. I didn't notice. So here you have, this is basically connected to the Kennedy family, which of course is interesting. If they would own a film studio, could they possibly then stage something on TV? Never, right? It's called Radio Keith Orpheum, and then it says 2 years later, another Kennedy company, the Pathé Studio, which is exactly the one we just showed, but I just saw it right now here. Maybe it doesn't say British Pathé, it says Pathé Exchange, but I would be surprised if they're not somehow related. Okay, it doesn't give an exact link, but yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they're related. Pathé America, here it says. But then, yeah, I'm not exactly sure if they're a franchise of each other, but I'd be surprised if they're unrelated.
Purchased Pathé, it looks like, in 1930 or 1931. Yeah. 1931. Okay. So they didn't own them originally, but they purchased them because they were like one of the biggest at the time. Hey, Semi just gifted 5 memberships. Get your memberships. Thank you very much. That's pretty cool.
Very nice. So yeah, we have all these film companies related to these presidential families. Isn't that curious? You know, just like Trump was a WWE actor and played in. Thank you. Played in, you know, Kevin. What's it called? Kevin Home Alone, or just Home Alone. And supposedly, I didn't even know this, but in Germany now, one of the names that is usually seen as a lower working class name is actually the name Kevin. And maybe supposedly this actually originated with the movie Kevin Home Alone, that then all kinds of random Germans that were not of aristocratic heritage or whatever, because they more like double and triple names and so on, named their sons Kevin. And then a few years later, Kevin became like, how should I say? It had like a bad reputation as a name, basically.
Well, basically, during the Prohibition, he had access to Scotch whiskey from Canada and was bringing in huge amounts of whiskey into the United States. So he was essentially the Great Gatsby kind of smuggler.
I heard this is the official story, but could you perfectly rule out that he was not also involved in, let's say, the trade of other drugs as well? Or this family?
Sure, right. It's totally plausible.
Because where's the real money and margin at?
I'm not sure what other drugs would have been. I mean, because
supposedly this would have related to Vietnam and whatever they produced there, for example. So heroin, we're talking about the real stuff, yeah, opiates and so on. And yeah, so how many presidents or high-level politicians or important individuals do exist in the Western Hemisphere that do not have some kind of connections to robber or drug baron operations? I wonder.
That's interesting also about the connection between Disney and William Randolph Hearst. There's a lot of interesting ties there, if, you know, just considering Kennedy with the RKO. So
just because someone's asking, of course, the one qualification for membership is just buying one. But if you want to get one,
or grabbing one quickly, you have to click on the thing when the person gives.
You have to click?
Isn't that how that works?
No, I think it's no. From what I understand, it is randomly distributed. But supposedly, YouTube is weighing it by the engagement. So you have to be a subscriber of the channel, and then the more you like and comment and so on a channel, the more likely it is that during a free giveaway raffle, you will randomly be assigned a membership. That's how I understand the system works.
Gotcha. Okay. I didn't know that. I should have looked into it more. All right. Well, here's Dark Journalist, Pine Gap, UFO.
Yeah. So here, this is relevant to me because last time I brought up this idea about, you know, JFK maybe having been a stage play, and you have Dark Journalists talking about this for years and years about those files, this and that. And then I did a bit of research and found there's only very few videos about this that like try to fact check some of the claims Dark Journalist makes. Here, for example, related to Pine Gap and what's actually occurring there, you know, some of it could be attributed to inaccuracy, some of it could be attributed to sensationalism, some of it could be attributed to bad journalism, and if you want to take the conspiratorial route, some of it could be contributed to gatekeeping in terms of not talking about certain things or not investigating certain angles. So what I did about 10 days ago, Dark Journalist did another show, and generally I liked his shows, and I really want to say I want to believe, just like we showed earlier with Owen and whoever else, that all of these individuals, especially if they have big platforms, really do their best, do the most thorough research, try to be the best individuals they can be, and do everything they can. How should I say? My skepticism, however, is increasing. And in this particular example, he made a 3-hour show, again, about the JFK files, let's say, because they were just released, so it's a big topic to talk about. And what I did, I was like, all right, there was the last super chat a few minutes ago. I'm actually going to shell out €5 and ask a question whether Dark Journalist is aware of the Miles Mathis papers. I brought them up on the previous show, and I think there will be a few more links here as well, just for reference, who is basically proposing the idea that this could have been a stage play, starting with the fact, from what I understand, that even the body which was presented of JFK literally was a wax figure, and many, many other issues here. So what then happened, I put my super chat. Immediately, it got recognized by the moderator, like, thank you, so much for the support. All right, that's great. Then there were plenty of minutes time until the next super chat came on or whatever else would have happened. My question was not read. And then at the very end of the talk, there was like, oh, now let's go through the super chats. And I was like, maybe now is the time when they will make sure, they at least read them out. Or even if you just say, oh, I think that's wrong or whatever, that could be fine. But what happened? My name or my handle was being read, but the question was not read at all.
Weird.
That's what I can
Why
tell
not just like laugh it off if you don't want to have people take it seriously? Just be like, no.
The only sideway comment that he made at some point was like, yeah, some people think that there was a substitute or whatever, but it's unsubstantiated. That's what he said, but it was not directly in response to my question, and my question did not get read. Not that I feel entitled that it must happen if I'm putting 5 euros in there, but then on the other side, what is that system for? And it's not like there were 100 million super chats, so there was plenty of time before and after my query to at least mention it, and then maybe even just say, oh, I think Miles Mathis is a bad researcher or whatever else. So that's what I can say. And this is by someone else just fact checking certain things that he talked about, where someone has a different opinion. Yeah. What can I say? I wish there were no gatekeepers, but
interesting.
I'm not sure if that's exactly correct.
Ignore that. Yeah. Weird. Okay, Steam It, Redline Aviator. Maybe he's going to do a video about it in the future. Who knows? Like, it's crazy to completely ignore the question. But okay. Louder with Crowder. Extremely cringy, Mike Bloomberg. What about Steam It? What's this?
Yeah, so Redline Aviator basically is the guy who is, for example, reading the Miles Mathis papers out on YouTube. I have linked some of them in the last show notes already. Here I just wanted to point out that he has the Steam It site, and he does quite interesting investigations from what I've seen so far. I can't talk about this specifically, but he's done a series on the JFK files, reading them out by Miles Mathis, and also reading out Miles Mathis papers on the, I believe, Abraham Lincoln, because that was also an assassination supposedly, right? Even though that's so, which year would that be? That's pretty long ago, no? Abraham Lincoln. I'm not an American, so excuse me. But anyhow, he has like, for me, really, so Civil War time, so he has some really interesting takes which do not fall into the category of the dichotomy, which is usually presented on mainstream media or even on alternative media, which now just takes the other part of the dichotomy, but like going deeper. And what's curious here, he even wrote a paper about Tartaria, which of course is very curious and something to look into, because even here he makes some connections where certain of the mainstream ideas about it may actually not be entirely correct, according to his analysis at least. I skimmed through it. For example, he's talking about Timurlane, I think, which he believes is just a moniker or just a mask for something else and not exactly correct. Things like that. So not saying he's exactly correct, but he at least appears to have an independent take on many topics. And I think it's worth checking out his papers. He's written many, many papers on different things.
Genghis Khan is just George Cohen. This is fun. I got to look at this guy's thing a little more. The Khans or the Cohens. Do you have any Holy Ghost? William Mathis, Tupac is still alive.
Yeah, so we spoke about this before. We don't need to get into it too deeply. I just wanted to show certain of his, papers and things that he's talking about.
Stylish shtick there. All right.
Another idea of a planned stage play death, basically. This is about Manson Tate. I don't know much about this, but I guess also quite a popular topic. And here on Tommy Rogers' channel, shout out to Tommy, he's re-uploading quite a few of these presentations, and it's cool to listen to. It's like several hours, and it really gives a truly alternative take.
Interesting. Okay.
And also, just because your new member is mentioning this, I recently did a show. You can find it on my channel on videos. I re-uploaded it with Ironwork, who I think is a cool and honest guy, doing like Earth research and so on. And I just brought up this idea to him, And yeah, he was literally speechless for a bit, even though that wasn't my intention. He was like, oh, like, damn, that kind of makes sense. And because he actually told me they only had a wax figure and all of those things. And if we know how other things can be manipulated, why shouldn't also this be manipulated? Because oftentimes the goal is just trauma, basically. That's my perception, at least, trauma and distraction. So why not stage these events? All right. Yes. Thank you, Tommy. I wouldn't have known about this if you wouldn't be subscribing, and I wouldn't have haunted your channel and check out what you're uploading. It's good stuff. And as you can see, he has 3 channels for good reason, because with contentious topics, YouTube isn't too happy. So thanks for bringing it to the public square still. And thank you, Bikini Truther, for the stickers you're throwing out.
Awesome. Okay, and Sage of Quay Radio.
Yeah, so this I'm only pointing out. I haven't looked into his things yet, but when I was commenting on Dark Journalist, with my face so close. Oh wait, where are we here? Come on, why are you not here?
What are you even trying to do?
Okay.
Yeah.
So so when I was commenting this on Dark Journalist, first I just put the question without a super chat, and then with the super chat. And these were the websites that were pointed out to me by the chat. There was basically one guy who said, oh, Miles Mathis is like a yarn spinning, self-assembling theorist or something like that. So just like a lowball comment to indicate
Rumpelstiltskin of conspiracies. Okay.
That Miles Mathis is a bad researcher. But then he also mentioned this Sage of Quay, and also the next website, which is called Center for an Informed America. So I was like, okay, even though I didn't get the answer I was looking for, at least I got a comment that was trying to discredit his research along with other researchers.
Fair.
And of course, in my mind, that means I have to check out these researchers more. So that's why I put them on the list.
All right. Center for Informed America. Why everything you think you know about the Abraham Lincoln assassination is wrong. Okay.
Let's not even read all those titles, so we're keeping YouTube safe. This is interesting. This is a movie mainly about, or at least the first part is about the Iraq War, exactly this with the statue. And along the lines of all the world is a stage, apparently now it is even admitted that this particular camera angle where they throw it on the statue was a psyop. Are you allowed to say that? I don't know. But basically, this was not a random thing occurring because the people got angry, but this was planned for, and someone in the intelligence services was like, oh, this is a good target, this is a good image, and we're going to make sure we're going to get this on film.
Of course.
Because of course, obviously, right? But just to anyone who understandably could have believed that maybe just the Iraqis were like, oh, we want to tear it down. But even if it was the case, they were certainly assisted by the Americans over there to make good optics.
Yeah, completely. I can't believe how many things about Iraq. I was pretty young at the time, so I believed things that I heard in the media at some point or other. And I don't remember even exactly which things at all times, but things about Saddam Hussein that I took for granted, and years later I'm like, wait, even that was a lie. Obviously the wood chipper thing was a lie, but there's just the idea that he was this complete psychopath who tortured people was just taken for granted from conservatives at the time. And you look at it now, you're like, well, how is it possible that so many of these things were completely just propaganda psyops in the United States that we still don't go back and critically analyze? There's probably the further you are from an event, the easier it is for you to look at this data because you didn't see the lies, the David Copperfield magic tricks, on TV.
Oh yeah, actually, that's actually a good point, because if you get initially traumatized and you're emotionally attached to something, there's probably some psychological, maybe even biological mechanism that's like ingraining it and making it maybe more difficult to contemplate that. So I always recommend everyone, whether we're talking about people representing a different gender or world events not being exactly what they appear to be, to start with topics that are emotionally remote from you, so you have a better chance of starting to objectively look at it and develop a method for it, and only then look at things which are more important to you. unless you want to, of course, jump right into the cold water. But this can be a good process, so you can learn about it from as much as possible, not really objective, no one is objective, but let's just say emotionally neutral point of view, so that then if more emotionally charged things come up, you're already aware of some of the techniques and some of the ideas, and you can more easily then understand or judge for yourself whether something you're more attached to maybe also is not exactly as it was initially presented. So, good thing I didn't see the moon landings, right? Live on TV.
Yeah.
On 67 or whatever it was.
It's true. And people, I feel like that's a big one. And like also New Yorkers, their ideas about September 11th are going to be like influenced by the fact that they were there, The poor dog Sirius, if you remember that, right? We were looking at that the other day. There was a dog at September 11th named Sirius. The only dog who died at September 11th, a yellow Labrador police dog named Sirius.
Well, that's definitely not coding.
Yeah, but you can get the T-shirt now from Paranoid American. It has a think tank little tag on him. But yeah, this is the dog who died, yo. Pretty crazy. Serious. Okay, and then Black Central Europe.
This is something that Alexander Mephistopheles, who we've had on the show about Arvanite history, a NEUROPA episode, he brought up on a talk I had on Sunday with Nachiketa, where we spoke about the recent David Ewing Jr. interviews and trying to understand it better. And he just brought up this supposedly 1440 tapestry. You can scroll down. And what's just curious about it, like it says, Black Central Europe, it shows Black individuals within the castles. And I haven't completely figured it out yet, but it certainly seems like also with the skin color and the whole racism thing, they try to distract you and they try to build up different narratives where it may actually be, how should I say, different than what we imagine, because of course we're always embedded in what we see today in the media about what does Europe look like or whatever else. And of course, a few hundred years, it may have been different. So that's one of the links towards that with the Moors in Europe.
Yeah, interesting. And then Hidden History with Raphael.
Yes, or on my channel, it's with Nachiketa. Basically, what we do here is we show some excerpts from recent David videos, and we just talk about it. And I try, it's only an attempt, to give like a summary of the recent things I've learned through David's explorations, let's say, and understanding and information. What's really interesting here is, basically this Mohammed Assad and Leopold Weiss, maybe we spoke about it briefly, which appears to be a modern day playing field of, for lack of a better term, Zionism versus Sunniism. And at least according to David, it seems that these are some of the, let's say, real power groups in the back end. Basically one group wanting to suppress and enslave everyone in a smart city and chip them. So having everyone as running around as a beast, just like in medieval times, and a different group which actually has some interest in educating people and giving them culture, having them wear clothes and all of that. It's of course a very complex topic, especially because we're talking about hundreds of years of history and we're talking about releasing our presuppositions, because it's always important to understand, looking at any documentation, what perspective is this written from, who was it written for, and only because it says we, for example, doesn't necessarily mean that you and I are meant, but maybe just that particular group that at that point declared themselves as we. So we speak about these kind of things also with Mephistopheles in the last hour. I think it's at least interesting food for thought. Can definitely recommend everyone to take a look.
Sweet. And now we're up to the Earth section.
Yes, so this one we can keep as short as possible because it's like a never-ending story. What would I like to say here? Yes, this one, The Fourth Man, I just want to bring up because last show I brought up this satire show which was called Fourth Man, about how controlled the media is in Austria after the Second World War and after the occupation. We've explored certain of these media personalities, but I didn't know that there is also a supposedly fourth man in this Shackleton expedition. Maybe we want to read that. It's only one paragraph. So this is an Antarctica expedition, if I understand correctly. Or south. What is Arctic, Antarctica? I don't even know. But one of these places you're not supposed to go freely. Yeah.
Arctic North and Arctic South. When I look back at those days, I have no doubt that Providence guided us, not only across those snow fields, but across the storm-white seas that separated Elephant Island from our landing place on South Georgia. I knew that during that long and racking march of 36 hours over the unnamed mountain and glaciers of South Georgia, it seemed to me often that we were 4, not 3. I said nothing to my companions on the point, but afterwards Worsley said to me, "Boss, I had a curious feeling on the march that there was another person with us." Crean confessed the same idea. One feels the dearth of human words, the roughness of mortal speech in trying to describe things intangible, but a record of our journeys would be incomplete without a reference to a subject very near to our hearts. And it was Jesus, right? Or what?
Yeah. Probably.
That they feel like, you know.
Well, I'm pretty sure it wasn't Muhammad. I mean, it always, again, depends who's writing this for whom. Is this even a real story? But this is just for the reference of the fourth man. I found that curious. There is a fourth man there as well. Okay, so here, and I'm not taking credit for it at all. Let's not play too much because we don't want to, how should I say, get the copyright thing. But basically, and this is really not because of me, but because I was listening to the right individuals, let's say, mainly Nachiketa and Zetetic Warrior. You can check out their channels. Sometimes I also link them in the show notes, who basically, at least half a year prior to this whole final experiment operation, to anyone who doesn't know, a few individuals, supposedly flat earthers and globe earthers, went to, now I'm even forgetting it again, which is it, the Antarctic or whatever, to observe a 24-hour sun or not. And ever since then, there's been a huge fallout. Even a long time before this occurred, certain individuals that did independent research, like Nachiketa and the Zetetic Warrior, put out certain ideas where they said, well, there could actually be a 24-hour sun there anyways. Even there is a document from so-called Zetetics 100 years ago that already pointed this out, by Lady Blunt, I believe. There's many other things. There were many strange things happening during the experiment, so-called experiment observation. For example, also in one particular image, you can see, I believe it is Mount Rossman in the back, like on this footage which they released on their channel. And if you compare that footage to a picture which was taken in 2016, strangely enough, the way the snow is on that mountain appears to be an exact match. However, that can happen, and many, many other things. We discussed some of it. But why I wanted to show this clip is basically because some people actually predicted that this will be used as a huge distraction. And now you literally have them talk about it on Joe Rogan. And even one of the individuals whom you have linked here, Jeranism, and you can see as his logo, for 10 years he had a logo which supposedly showed a AE, so equidistant azimuthal or something, azimuthal equidistant map, I believe, like Gleason's type map.
With an X through it.
Well, now it has an X through it, because now he's basically the poster child for someone converting who previously was skeptic of the globe, let's say, and debunking it with 100 million videos. But now he's the poster child of basically, due to one single observation, if that was even happened the way they portray it, completely changing his viewpoint. And some individuals already months before that happened predicted that this was going to happen. So I just find that interesting, how some people can have such foresight and such logic that they already knew a year ago, basically, that this will eventually end up on Joe Rogan. And the big joke here is that Jeranism, this guy supposedly lit a joint in Antarctica and now gave the lighter to this guy, who then gave it to Joe Rogan. And basically, it's already in the works that very soon he will appear on Joe Rogan. Yeah, I mean, people can make of this what they will, but it is highly suspect, because who has this type of connections? And it very much seems like a setup that is very controlled and planned, let's say.
Along that line, Joe Rogan constantly is on Kill Tony, which has like been on YouTube for years. I think you've probably seen Kill Tony. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's like a comedy thing, but now it's gonna be on Netflix. He's like a closet homosexual who does shows with Joe Rogan and has a bunch of judges, kind of like the Gong Show, that are judging like what went wrong for you, like with your comedy act, because it's not that good, kind of a thing, you know, over and over again. And Joe Rogan's continuing to be a judge often on the Kill Tony show, and now Kill Tony's having some sort of a Netflix special, which to me is interesting because Netflix is the ultimate you know, state-sponsored PSYOP propaganda for the whole world, Obama money, all that, right? So it's the mainstream thing, right? So if Kill Tony, if the hyper right are involved with the neo left, and they are now making propaganda that the right can enjoy on left-wing platforms, right? Where are we headed in terms of this Trump economy? Is it really some sort of, because a lot of people think they're doing what they're doing because they're rebelling. It's like a reverse psychology kind of thing. So what happens when you start to accept that that's what's going on? But
yeah, so here are just more fun videos. This is a fun video by someone who believes in the official model, and then here just with a light source tries to simulate certain effects, and then himself realizes that the model he's believing in doesn't exactly match his own experimental demonstration here. So we don't have to watch it. I think it's about Venus and which shadow is shown where. And then he's like, why is there actually this shadow happening? We shouldn't be able to see this. Why are we able to see it? Yeah, so maybe the model he believed in previously isn't entirely correct. And again, I'm not making any strong or positive statements in terms of what model supposedly is correct. I'm just encouraging everyone to take a look again from a neutral stance and try to see the discrepancies in any model, and also to understand, even though everyone loves the certainty, to make sure, oh, this is the map, this is exactly what it is. Let's not fool ourselves, and let's actually, you know, collect more data independently about anything and everything, so we can figure this out together. That is my stance on the whole thing. Yeah, and here, interestingly enough, this is recently on the Library of Congress. They put out these, how do they call it? Unconventional theories about the Earth's shape. So even Library of Congress is dealing with this, which is cool, I guess. Make people think and consider different ideas.
Universe inside of a bucket.
What I still like best is the planet or whatever it is on the back of a turtle or something, like Discworld, right?
That's the most practical. That's what we really should be expecting.
Yeah, or it's like a snow globe. Yeah, that's the other one.
Here's the Earth flying through space off the map, and then yeah, the correct flat surface stationary map. Interesting. Okay. Astronauts begin their journey home, or do they?
Yeah, so this is, of course, time and time again, I have to bring out Mac Bitter Truth, because I also think he's one of the few real ones online who's always giving fun commentary about, you know, whatever is going on. So yeah, if someone wants like some comedic relief, I can definitely recommend his channel and checking out his videos. And then let's see, what are the last things we have? We're almost through. Scroll, scroll, scroll.
Miles Mathis, disproof of Isaac Newton.
Right. So I really don't understand enough about this, but since Miles Mathis has so many interesting papers, I think this could also be something interested to anyone interested in, I guess this is trigonometry or something, or geometry, to check this out in more detail and take a close look what Miles Mathis says about Newton's understandings.
Okay. And the Military Auxiliary Radio System, Mars.
Yeah, so some people say this is what Elon Musk actually talks about when we're going to Mars, although at least according to this site, this is a system it's not decommissioned, but I think the Navy isn't using it anymore, and it's like a fallback communication system. So from what I understand, this is like, what type of waves would this be? Like the old type of waves, so not digitized and so on, to basically have an emergency broadcast system available to the military forces in the US, if I understood this correctly. So it says it's still an active duty, Reserve, National Guard units, Navy Marine Corps, civilian auxiliary, consisting primarily of licensed amateur radio operators. And some people say this is what Elon Musk talks about when he's talking about Mars. I have no clue if that's correct or not. I also don't exactly understand how this would relate. Maybe the new Mars is just a Starlink or whatever. But then, of course, I would love to understand what the acronym for moon would stand for, especially considering that officially we've been to the moon and back. JFK wanted to go to the moon, not because it's easy, but because it's so hard. So I'd love to know then what moon stands for symbolically.
I don't know if you watched Elon Mars transitioned child's interview with Hassan, the like terrorist supporter guy that is kind of famous right now. I don't know, but
I didn't watch it. I only saw that he's making a big splash. I can only assume it's another distraction, but I don't know what he's talking about. What is he saying?
Basically, I don't know. He's not that interesting, but you can look into him more if you want. Just the point was that Elon's child says that he never planned on going to Mars. He continually said it as a publicity stunt, and then this child saying it's a publicity stunt that's being done. So I think that kind of relates to this idea that saying Mars is a way of getting more people. It's a corporate culture ideology that gets a bunch of people wrapped up in his dream, right? But it's not that he ever intends on actually going and colonizing Mars, right? Not literally what they think of as Mars. Yeah, to the moon. Crypto is moon. Could be like Forest City, Malaysia. The M's probably from Malaysia. Come on, I wouldn't be surprised. But yeah, so I'll look into that as from a Mars perspective. Then also here's interview with ex-flat earther smashing his balloons.
Not recommended. This is Mark Sargent who wants to do a commercial, which is interesting. And here basically, so if you are really interested, then you can listen here to, on the right-hand side, you would have the recent, let's say, reversion. What would be is like in Islam. It's a reconversion, right? Reconversion. Yeah. Because in Islam, they say you can only reconvert because they claim everyone originally was Muslim. And here it's similar, assuming everyone, at least in the current world, everyone originally believed exactly in the model the way NASA presents it. Now you have a convert who is Jeranism. So if you want to listen to him, you can do that here. You can make up your own mind. What I do find, how should I say it, not the most gentleman-like is that, or not the most neutral, is while it is understandable that if you have an in-group, let's say you really believe NASA or you're more skeptical of NASA, that you would maybe to a certain extent have more sympathy for your in-group. Generally, that's very understandable and that's perfectly okay. However, especially in the sphere of discussing the Earth-shaped things get out of hand pretty quickly and pretty harshly oftentimes. People are not afraid to call each other names and just very lowball ad hominem attacks and so on. And the guy on the left is quite high on the ladder on doing that as well. But then, of course, because the right-hand individual now switched sides, now it's almost like, I'm just going to say like they're best buddies, not to use any other words. And that's just, while again, on the one hand, it's cool. Of course, someone is joining your team, you're happy for it and so on. But on the one hand, to have, let's say, no decorum at all, and then this next moment, because you just switch one particular position, suddenly you're super friendly.
You're in the lodge.
Like it's like politics, It's like, well.
And then Nachiketa's video, Globe Religion versus Flat Earth Cult.
Yes. So here, Nachiketa always does great shows, great conversations, or even great monologues. And all I want to point out here, and I think he does that correctly, it's already in the title, which says Flat Earth Cult versus Globe Earth Religion, simply because one is a religion. Why? Because it's generally widely accepted and promoted. And the other thing is being labeled as a cult just because it's smaller. And everyone who's had already a more objective view on religion overall understands the differentiation that many things would be considered a cult just because they're small organizations or smaller organizations. And the one that's promoted by the state, let's say, for example, Christianity in the Western sphere, is a religion, even though there's plenty of aspects associated with it which could be deemed to be cultish just as well. But again, here, it's just a matter of perspective.
Right. Cult classics, for sure. Oh, that's crazy. Well, I want to look more into the military auxiliary radio system. That's a good point. Where everything is kept and what's being built, which antennas, you know, how this is used for weather control and everything. We should look into the Mars system. But that's pretty much all the subjects that you have here for today.
That's it, yes.
So everybody, if you want to check them out, you go to commency.at. You can go to the log right here. Log, the top one is 925 unrelated, it says. And so here you've got all sorts of subjects. We just went through them. You can check them out for yourself.
Yes.
Make sure that you
It's all in the description, in the first links, and below you have all the links and all the channels for Xirtus. Kindly, if you can, if you have any of those platforms, subscribe to as many as possible, just because sometimes it may be necessary that we're not streaming something on YouTube, and then it's easier, you know, to just switch to a different platform and you'll have everything there. So that's a good thing. And of course, you can join the Xirtus channel and support. I still love your Russian AI. And I have to say, Andreas, because you were one of the first who's been doing that, I'm wondering how many years it will take until there will be particular AIs, or they will unearth again the old source code for all the AIs, because they have a very particular art style to them. All I can say, everyone who's using Telegram, on your GIFs, just enter Xirtus and you will get like the original
classic
face change classic things,
historic,
which have a really cool style unto themselves. I'm not sure, it's almost better than what they have now. So everyone go check it out. And of course, thank you, Andreas, so much. Thanks everyone in chat for your interest, for your support, and for making up your own mind and your own heart. As always, don't believe everything they say on the screen, including here. Find out for yourself.
Yeah, right.
Thank you very much. Let's play some music.
Yeah, which one you want?
Goodbye. I got it.
Nice.
Yeah! Oh! NEUROPA.
This was NEUROPA.